Well, there will be football, college football, on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week, so you can place them day of every single day in the next few days. But there has been a lot of cancels or canceled games so far this week, the highest amount that we've seen so far in football.
Yeah, a ton of games have been canceled. Some have been postponed, moved to later dates. We'll see what happens because if these continue to pile up, it'll be tough to move more and more games. But we start off Louisiana Monroe at Arkansas State in the Sun Belt, Ohio State, Maryland, Georgia, Missouri, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Memphis Navy, Auburn, Mississippi State, Alabama, LSU, Air Force, Wyoming. And I'll mention Cal ASU again because, that one's up in the air. So it's worth mentioning and being aware of that, hey, this game may or may not get played. But Higgins, those are some big teams. Number 1, Alabama. Number 5, A&M. 3, Ohio State. 12, Georgia. Those are some big names that are not playing this weekend.
Yes, they are. You mentioned 9 games, that's 18 teams, across 6 different conferences that have had to cancel games. 4 of those games being in the SEC. Now, that is concerning to me at the future of the SEC season if they're potentially canceling these right now. But, Brett, to get into the games that actually are going on right now, we'll talk about Friday's game in a second, but I want to talk about Wisconsin because we're talking about the coronavirus real quick. And Wisconsin's just coming out of their coronavirus spell that had their games canceled for a few weeks. And they are going to go and play Michigan, a team that is down, a team that lost to their rival Michigan State, that lost to number 13 Indiana, who I took on the money line last week because I thought they've made me a believer in a little bit. But Wisconsin, they are heading to Michigan for that rivalry game, and those guys must be healthy or not banged up at least as you would be having played 2 football games like Michigan has, and they must be hungry because they're playing Michigan, whereas Michigan's probably beaten up a little bit. There might be some infighting considering they've lost 2 games that they probably wish they should have won. I think Wisconsin, ranked 13 in the country, is going to come in and grab that W.
Yeah,
So I am taking. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I should say what part of that I am taking. I'm taking Wisconsin minus 3.5.
all good, man. I'm glad you clarified. But yeah, I mean, Wisconsin blew out Michigan a year ago. Um, I don't expect it to be as big of a blowout, but I would take Wisconsin in this spot as well. That's where I'd be leaning. I stayed away because I'm a little worried about the rest versus Russ thing. Michigan, although they haven't played well, have played the last few weeks, so that might be beneficial to them. And also, Wisconsin's starting quarterback Graham Mertz was one of the players that tested positive, so I'm not even sure what he's been able to do practice wise or not. So that concerns me a little bit, but I Wisconsin runs the ball. They play behind that O line. They have one of the better defenses in college football. They're not Northwestern good. They're not Northwestern good, Higgins, but Wisconsin's pretty good at moving the ball via the ground, and I think 3.5 is definitely within reason here.
Well, so to your point about concern over Mertz, he still is in protocol, so he has not been able to practice yet. But they say he could play against Michigan, and I'm guessing that's probably why that line is at 3.5, and it would probably lengthen if you find out or confirm whether he's going to play or not.
Yeah, I mean he was great in their I guess only game.
248 yards, 5 touchdown passes in a slaughtering over Illinois. I think that's enough of that game, though. Let's talk about the Thursday, Friday night that we have. Because, like I said, we got college football Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. So if the Thursday night football in the NFL doesn't interest you, Colorado State at Boise State might on Thursday night. And then if that game doesn't interest you, there's 3 on Friday, and at least one of those should interest you.
Yeah, I mean number 7 Cincinnati in action, Minnesota Iowa in the Big 10. And the second week in a row, we get the blue turf on national TV midweek. So I'm all about that, Higgins. But let's focus in on your Bearcats. You've been on them all year.
Yes, Cincinnati's made me a believer. I keep picking them. They keep cashing checks, so why not pick them again? Minus 27.5, that did scare me a little bit. It did scare me a little bit, except for the fact that East Carolina is 1-5 on the season. They've allowed 38 points per game. Cincinnati averages 39. So I think Cincinnati's going to score in the 40s, maybe the 50s. 4 touchdowns should be clearable in this. That's a lot to take, but I'm confident in the Bearcats. Ranked number 7, going to continue to try to strengthen that resume. And when you have a team that's 1-5 on your schedule, especially a mid-major, you have to put on a strong performance if you're trying to get that college football playoff spot that you and I have been talking about routinely over the past few weeks for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be interesting if them or BYU. I mean, for instance, Ohio State this week, Higgins, they're not playing because of COVID. So does an undefeated Cincinnati or BYU get more respect than an undefeated Ohio State? Something to watch. Maybe did they get more respect than a one-loss Clemson? Something to watch. Uh, but we've got a great slate of games that are happening on Saturday. Felipe Franks makes his return to Florida to take on the man who replaced him, Higgins. Florida's minus 17.5 in this one. We're not on it. I just wanted to mention it. But a game I am on is in the ACC is Miami at Tech. Miami, number 9 in the country, travels to Tech. De'Aaron Kings look great for the Hurricanes. They're plus 1.5 on the road in this spot, and I'm just going to be honest, Higgins. I haven't seen enough out of Tech. This may be a trap here where I say, oh, the number 9 team in the country. Tech's a tough place to go in and win a football game. They're a respectable team, but I just think Miami's played well, and I believe in De'Aaron King and this Miami Hurricanes offense to get it done.
I believe a little bit more than you do.
Ooh.
I believe about a point and a half more than you do because instead of taking the spread, I'm taking the money line. Yes, it's hard to win in at Tech, but you know who won at Tech? Liberty. Last week, 38-35. Now they were the number 25 team in the country, but no one really expected that to actually happen. And Miami ranked number 9, a much more tried and true with a quarterback like De'Aaron King that you mentioned. They're going to get this win. It's disrespectful to not have them favored in this game. Give me them at plus 104. I feel like they should be favored by at least a field goal in this game. It makes me laugh. It makes me laugh.
Well, I'm glad you're chuckling. Hopefully, we end up laughing all the way to the bank.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Otherwise, I'll look like a laughing fool.
But you mentioned Indiana earlier. They travel to Michigan State this week. That's another team you said you started to believe in, Higgins.
Yes, I mentioned Indiana earlier. I mentioned Michigan State when we were talking about Michigan hosting Wisconsin. Now, Michigan State, I thought may have proved themselves with that big win against Michigan. They looked great, they sounded great, all of that. Then they went and they got embarrassed by Iowa at home, 49-7 last week. Meanwhile, Indiana proved themselves getting a win over Michigan. Let's not forget they also have a common opponent against Rutgers, who Michigan State also lost to, and Indiana won. So you know what? Indiana made me a believer. I took them on the money line as the underdog last week. I'm going to take them as the favorite on the spread this week, minus 7.5. I'm okay with the touchdown and the hook because I think the Spartans are going to fall again, even though this does feel a little bit like a trap game because of how well they won when they were in Michigan playing against Michigan. Maybe, no. Indiana minus 7.5. I almost changed it live, but I'm not going to. No.
Almost changed it live. Okay. I like it. Indiana minus 7.5. Well, sticking in the Big Ten, I'm gonna hop on over to Penn State at Nebraska, and boy, have the mighty fallen. But not enough for me to stay away from this game because I'm on it. Or I'm really close to being on it, Higgins. I haven't placed my bet yet, but Nebraska plus 3.5 at home versus a really bad Penn State team. I think Nebraska's gonna make a quarterback change this week. Honestly, I think it's gonna be Luke McCaffrey. He looked really good in the fourth quarter versus Northwestern last week, and if they make that change, I'm all in on this bet. I'm really close to making it regardless, but Luke McCaffrey's going to be the difference in this one for me. If I wake up Saturday morning and I know for sure he's my guy, I'm definitely backing the Huskers in that game.
I know that's what a lot of the Husker fans that I personally know expect to happen is to see Luke start the game. They think that the Adrian Martinez experiment may be done, a long fall from him starting last year as a Heisman hopeful on the short list for betting lists. He was there. He was around like plus 1400 I think last year at the start of last season. He went from being a Heisman hopeful to losing his job to Luke McCaffrey's not a shortfall, really, only because McCaffrey is a legit quarterback. His brother, Christian McCaffrey, obviously a fantastic athlete. Luke McCaffrey's shown that he can be trusted in those late minutes, put together some strong performances in the fourth, even though Nebraska didn't necessarily get the win last week. I'm not on that game yet, but I would say that I'm with you on leaning depending on what I hear about McCaffrey if he actually gets the starter.
Also, just interesting to note because, we got to give everyone the information, right? Penn
Mm-hmm.
State says they're sticking with Sean Clifford, but there's talks of a quarterback change in Happy Valley as well. So the double quarterback change, I don't know if that becomes a factor at all, but just lots of interest for me in this one, honestly. For two pretty not good teams. You know what? I'll just say it, Higgins. For two pretty bad teams, uh, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what these new quarterbacks might be able to do.
Now, since you brought up Penn State, I do want to mention there was news about Penn State this afternoon. Their running back, Journey Brown, is medically retiring from football. When he went through the COVID testing earlier this season, they found a heart related issue. It's not COVID related, but it does jeopardize his ability to play football. He was put on like the medically reserved list for this season, and he's deciding he's going to be retiring instead. So big news out of the Penn State backfield and for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, wow. I mean, we talked about that when it happened, and that is huge news. And obviously, we're thinking of Journey Brown and his family. I'm sure that's not the news he wanted, but I'm glad they found it before something tragic happened.
Absolutely, absolutely. Preventative measures are always best in the medical field.